I should have known something was wrong. The very first time I heard the bathroom door lock, 8 years of marriage, and Amy had never once felt the need to lock that door while brushing her teeth or putting on makeup. Our house wasn't big, and we were never precious about privacy. Usually one of us would shout through the door asking how long the other would be, but 3 months before everything collapsed, that familiar routine changed. Instead of the usual creak of the door and running water, I started hearing a soft, deliberate click, then her voice quiet, hurried, like she was trying to make sure I didn't hear the words, only the shape of them. At first, I convinced myself it was stress. Maybe something at Dalton Manufacturing was weighing on her. HR never seemed like a peaceful job, and Amy dealt with people complaining, arguing, or trying to talk their way out of consequences. Maybe she just needed a few extra minutes alone each morning. But I'm a mechanic. My whole life revolves around sounds, new ones. Wrong ones, ones that don't belong. You can ignore a new rattle in an engine for a while, but eventually it gets loud enough to demand your attention. The bathroom lock was that rattle, and like a fool, I pretended nothing was wrong. My name is Oliver Knox. I'm 38. Owner of Knox Auto Body on the east side of town. My dad left me a house that needed work, a worn toolbox, and a lot of debt. From that mess, I built a shop that keeps the lights on and gives me a purpose. It's not glamorous. I usually smell like brake fluid and old oil by the end of the day. But it's mine. I built every inch of it with my hands. Amy and I met when she brought her car in for the first time. She was sharp, polished, the kind of person who could hold eye contact without blinking. Back then, I thought that confidence was attractive, something solid to hold on to. I didn't realize that the distance behind it was something else entirely. By the time October rolled around, that distance had turned into a canyon. That Tuesday evening, I was in the basement, hunched over Mrs. Henderson's ancient Buick carburetor. I like working down there, the clutter, the hum of the old fluorescent light, the familiar scrape of tools on metal. Machines make sense to me. You treat them right? They behave. You ignore the warning signs. They fall apart. Simple. I heard the front door open above me around 8. Amy's heels crossed the floor, lighter than usual. Then she hummed, just a little melody off key. Cheerful. Wrong. Amy never hummed. Not when she was happy. Not when we first met. Not even on our wedding day. Hearing it now, out of nowhere, sent a flicker of unease through me. I wiped my hands and went upstairs. She stood in the kitchen, lit by the soft yellow overhead light, pouring herself a glass of wine. Her smile wasn't the forced, tired one she usually wore around me. It was bright, confident, a smile that told me she already knew how this conversation would go. And she liked the ending. My stomach tightened. "Oliver," she said brightly, "we need to talk." Those 4 words hit like a punch. No one ever says them right before delivering good news. I grabbed a beer and leaned against the counter. "All right, talk." She took a long sip of her wine, set the glass down carefully, and looked straight at me. "You know how Steph and Greg have been trying to have a baby?" I nodded slowly. Steph is Amy's older sister, always perfectly dressed, always looking down her nose at everyone. Greg is her husband, some finance guy who calls everyone buddy and leaves behind a trail of expensive cologne. I never liked him, but I tolerated him. That's what you do for family. They've been having trouble. Amy continued. Steph can't carry to term. It's been really hard on them. She spoke like she was narrating a training video at work, smooth, controlled, almost rehearsed. "So," she said, "we came up with a solution." My grip tightened around the bottle. "What kind of solution?" Her face lit up with something like pride. "I'm going to be their surrogate," she said. "I'm already pregnant." For a moment, I just stared at her. The fridge hummed. The clock ticked. My world tilted. "You're what I finally asked?" "Pregnant," she repeated calmly. 8 weeks. It's Greg's baby. Obviously. But it's for Steph. She said it like she was telling me about a donation she'd made, like I was supposed to congratulate her. "When were you planning on telling me?" I said slowly. that you're carrying another man's child. I'm telling you now, she said. We did it during the family vacation last month. At the lake house. I remembered that week clearly her insisting I stay home because it should be sisters only. To me spending late nights at the shop trying to drown out the sense that something in our marriage was slipping away. So let me get this straight. I said, you went on vacation without me, slept with your sister's husband, got pregnant, and you're standing here telling me it's a good thing? It wasn't like that. She snapped. It was clinical. Mostly clinical. Greg said multiple attempts increased the chances. So Greg said. I echoed. And Steph knows about this. Of course she knows. It was her idea. That's when the truth hit me. This wasn't an accident. This was planned. A family project, with one glaring exception: I wasn't included. Get out, I said. She blinked. What? Get out of my house. Oliver, you're being unreasonable. I almost laughed. Unreasonable. After everything she'd just admitted, you lied to me. I said, you planned this behind my back? And you think I'm unreasonable? It's not cheating if it's for family. She shot back. She meant it. I saw it in her eyes. You have 15 minutes. I said, pack a bag. Leave. After that, your things go on the lawn. You can't kick me out of my own house, she snapped. This house is in my name. I said, 15 minutes. She stormed upstairs, slamming drawers and talking loudly into her phone. I didn't follow. I went back to the basement, but my hands shook too badly to hold a wrench. 12 minutes later, 2 car doors slammed outside. Voices rose. Heavy footsteps approached. I walked upstairs just as Greg staggered into my living room, reeking of whiskey. Amy stood behind him, suitcase in hand, chin high. What do you think you're doing? Buddy Greg slurred. You can't kick my wife out. Your wife, I said. That was fast. She's carrying my child, he said proudly. That makes her my responsibility. It took everything in me not to laugh. You've got 10 seconds to get out, I said. Before this gets worse? Greg puffed up. But I didn't back down. Not this time. This isn't over. He muttered as he grabbed Amy's suitcase and stomped outside. You're right, I said. It's not. I watched their car disappear down the street, then stood alone in the quiet house. 8 years of marriage gone in one conversation. My phone buzzed. A text from Nikki Val says something huge happened with Amy. You okay? I stared at the message for a long moment before typing. It's all true. Every word. And just like that, the whole town would know by morning, Wednesday morning. The entire town knew. That's the thing about small towns, they don't just absorb gossip. They ignite with it. All it took was Val getting a whiff of what happened. And by sunrise, half the county had an opinion about my marriage, Greg's moral compass, and Amy's definition of family loyalty. When I opened the shop at 7, my phone already had 3 missed calls from people I hadn't spoken to since high school and a friend request from someone claiming to be a reporter. Nikki was leaning against the garage door, holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing the widest grin I'd ever seen on her face. Good morning. Celebrity, she said, handing me a cup. How's it feel to be the most talked about guy in town? Like I'd rather be invisible, I muttered. Nikki laughed. She's built like she could lift an engine block without breaking a sweat. And she has a habit of speaking before her brain fully considers the consequences, but she's loyal, the kind of person you want beside you when the world starts tilting. So she asked as I unlocked the bay doors, what's the plan, divorce vengeance? Burning down a BMW? No burning, I said. But yeah, divorce. Eventually. Right now, I'm just trying to wrap my head around the fact that Amy thought any of this made sense. For what it's worth, Nikki said, following me inside. I always thought she was off. Off. Too perfect. Too controlled. Like someone who practices smiling in the mirror. I never trusted people like that. Would have been nice to hear that 8 years ago, I said. Would you have listened? Probably not. Mrs. Henderson came by mid-morning to pick up her Buick. She's in her 70s. The kind of sweet elderly lady who smells like lavender and believes that marriage is a sacred, unbreakable bond. She patted my hand, with sympathy dripping from her voice. I heard about Amy. Dear, that poor girl must be so confused. I didn't have the heart to explain that Amy wasn't confused at all. She was determined. Had a whole plan. A family plan. A future with Greg she'd designed without bothering to tell her husband. Instead, I just nodded and wished Mrs. Henderson a good day. The shop stayed busy. But not because everyone suddenly needed repairs. People wanted to see me in person. They wanted to look me in the eyes. Hear my version. Decide whether I was the victim or the fool. I kept my mouth shut. Let them speculate. I had bigger problems on the horizon. Around noon. My phone rang. Unknown number. Knox Auto Body. I answered. Mr. Knox. This is Patricia Winters, from Dalton Manufacturing. I'm Amy's supervisor. I stepped outside, away from the noise of the shop. Yes. Ms. Winters. I'm calling because Amy hasn't shown up for work today. She's not answering her phone, given the circumstances. I wanted to check if she was with you. Not anymore. I said. She might be staying with Greg Morrison. Silence. A sharp inhale. As in Stefania Morrison's husband. That's the one. When she finally spoke again, her voice was tight, controlled. Thank you for the information. Mr. Knox. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. HR was Amy's department. Appearance mattered. Reputation mattered. If Amy had blown up her personal life in a way that might bleed into the workplace, Patricia wasn't going to stand behind her. Good. I hung up and walked back inside just in time to see Nikki talking to a man in an expensive suit. Tall. Gray hair. Immaculate tie. And an expression like he smelled something rotten. Oliver. Nikki said, jaw tight. This is Mr. Morrison. Greg's father. Of course. Richard Morrison. He said curtly. He didn't offer his hand. I assume you know why I'm here. Enlighten me. I said, wiping my hands on a cloth. You can stop harassing my son and daughter-in-law. Daughter-in-law, I repeated. Interesting choice of words, considering Amy and I are still married. That is a technicality. Richard snapped. Greg and Amy are building a family. A decent man would step aside and allow them to be happy. I stared at him, stunned by how bold the entitlement was. Let me make sure I understand. I said slowly, your son sleeps with my wife. Gets here, prenant. And you think the decent thing is for me to walk away quietly so he doesn't have to feel guilty? Sometimes, Richard said, straightening his tie. Life takes unexpected turns. A man should have the wisdom to accept them. And what if I don't accept them? Then you will regret it. Our family has connections. Laviers. Influence. If you make trouble, we will handle it. Is that a threat? It's advice. I took a step closer. Here's my advice. Get out of my shop before I forget I'm a professional. Richard held my gaze for half a second, then turned and walked out. His Mercedes looked out of place in the gravel lot. Too polished for a place where people tracked grease on their boots. When he drove away, Nikki let out a low whistle. That family needs a reality check. Oh, they're going to get one. I said, because people like the Morrisons forget something important. They may have money and power, but they also rely on everyday people, people who fix their cars, people who know things. And I knew someone who knew a lot more. I stepped into my office, pulled out my phone, and dialed a number I hadn't used in months. Harlan. Came the familiar gravelly voice when he answered. Been a while. Yeah, I said. It's Oliver. You still spending your evenings at the Rusty Anchor? Every night. He chuckled. Why? I need information. Off the record. About the Morrison family. Everything you can dig up. Business dealings. Legal trouble. Anything I can use. There was a pause. A long one. You planning something? Oliver. I'm planning to protect myself. Another pause. Then a sigh. All right, he said. I'll see what I can find. But be careful. That family doesn't play clean. Neither do I said quietly. Not anymore. When I hung up, I realized something. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I wasn't just hurt or shocked or trying to stay afloat. I was ready to fight back. And for the first time since Amy locked that bathroom door, I felt like I was in control. The rusty anchor looked the same as it always did: dim lights. Cheap beer. Old neon buzzing in the corner, but that night it felt different. Harlan had asked me to meet him there. And when I walked in, half the bar turned to look at me. Word had spread fast. And by Thursday, the whole town wasn't just whispering about what happened. They were taking sides. Harlan sat at the end of the bar, hunched over a glass of whiskey like it held answers. He'd been a detective once, before retiring into a life of beer, fishing stories, and occasional favors for people he didn't entirely dislike. I slid onto the stool next to him. You buying? He asked without looking up. You said you had something. I do, but the whiskey doesn't drink itself. I ordered him another, grabbed a beer for myself, and waited. He pulled a worn notebook from his jacket. Greg Morrison, he said, flipping it open. 37. Works for his father's financial firm, if you can call, showing up 3 days a week and drinking $200 bourbon at lunch working. Not surprising, I muttered. But here's what is... Harlan tapped the page. 3 years ago, a client filed a complaint, said Greg made inappropriate advances during a meeting, tried to kiss her. Why wasn't that public? Morrison's paid her off. NDA. Buried deep. He took a slow sip, had to call in 2 favors just to sniff it out. My grip tightened around my beer. And Amy. Harlan Sahil. Flipping another page. Wasn't exactly a model employee. Complaints about favoritism. Rumors about inappropriate workplace relationships. Nothing proven. But HR had been watching her. I thought of Patricia Winter's voice on the phone, tight. Cold. Calculating. She'd probably been waiting for an excuse. What else, I asked. Greg's got a reputation for chasing married women. Thrill of it. I guess. Power trip. People talk. Oliver. They always do. I leaned back, letting that sink in. Amy wasn't Greg's first married target. She was just the one foolish enough to think she was special. I'm not done, Harlan said. Greg's been siphoning money from the company. Small amounts. Spread thin. But they add up, and he's been sending them offshore. That jolted me upright. You're sure? Positive. If Richard Morrison found out, the man would throw his own son through a window. I exhaled slowly. Thanks. Harlan. Oliver, he said, turning toward me with a rare seriousness. I've known you a long time, and I can tell when a man's looking to burn something down. I didn't answer. Be smart, he warned. People like the Morrisons when they panic. They get cruel. So do people like me, I said quietly. Before he could respond, the bar door opened and the noise dropped. Greg walked in with 2 friends, all loud voices and stumbling steps. He spotted me instantly and grinned, like this was all a joke. Well, he said, swaggering forward. If it isn't the ex-husband. Not ex yet, I said. Still married, which makes what you did very clear. Adultery, Greg said, slurring a little. Big word for a grease monkey. They teach you that at mechanic school. I didn't move. You know what they teach us when something's broken. You either fix it or throw it out. You calling Amy broken? I'm calling you someone who destroys everything he touches. He stepped closer, but Harlan rose from his seat. Greg froze. Even drunk. He knew picking a fight with a retired detective was a bad idea. You need to leave, Harlan said. Greg sneered. It's a free country. And I'm telling you, Harlan said calmly, if you don't walk out, you'll be spending the night in a cell. Greg glanced around the room. Every pair of eyes on him was full of disgust. He finally backed off, muttering curses as he left with his buddies. I took a long drink, the bitterness settling in my throat like gravel. That was satisfying. The bartender, Sheila, said, "That wasn't the fight." I said, "That was the rehearsal." A little later, Nikki walked in with Val, who looked like she couldn't wait to unleash the latest rumors. Val always reminded me of a tornado holding a phone. Chaos with lipstick. She plopped down next to me. "Oliver," she whispered, even though half the bar could hear. "You would not believe the things Amy told me." Nikki gave me a subtle nod. "Let her talk." Val leaned in. She said Greg made her feel alive. That he had energy. That you didn't. I felt something twist in my chest. But my voice stayed flat. "And you believed her?" I told her she was being ridiculous. Val said quickly, "You're a catch. Any woman would be lucky to have you. But Amy's always been obsessed with appearances. Cars. Money. Fancy things." "Val," I said, "I need you to do something." Her eyes lit up. "Val loved being useful in a way that made trouble. I need you to tell everyone exactly what Amy told you. Every detail. Don't leave anything out." Val grinned. "Oh, I can do that." And she did. For the next 2 hours, she held court like a seasoned performer. Every patron heard new pieces of the story, Amy planning the affair, bragging about Greg, mocking my shop and my job, claiming she deserved a better life. By the time last call rolled around, Amy's reputation was hanging by a thread. Nikki drove me home. The night air felt sharp, heavy with the sense that the ground was shifting beneath our feet. "You know this is just the beginning, right?" she said. "I know. Greg's not going to let this go. Neither is his family." "I'm counting on it," I said, because even a cornered animal shows its true nature. Inside my empty house, I sat in the dark, thinking about the past 3 days. My marriage was over. The truth was out. And now I was standing at the beginning of a war I never asked for. Some wars start because someone swings first. Others start because someone refuses to stay quiet. I wasn't quiet anymore. The Harvest Festival was coming that weekend, and I hadn't planned on showing my face. But Nikki insisted. "You need to go," she said the next morning. "People need to see you standing, not hiding." Maybe she was right. Maybe showing up mattered. And so, reluctantly, I agreed. I just didn't know that the Harvest Festival would become the moment everything truly detonated. I hadn't planned on going to the Harvest Festival. Crowds aren't really my thing. And the idea of weaving through people while they whispered about my life like it was a television drama didn't exactly sound appealing. But Nikki showed up at my house Saturday morning with a look that said arguing wasn't an option. "You're going," she said, arms crossed. "You're going to walk down Main Street with your head up, not skulking around like you did something wrong." I didn't say I was skulking. I muttered, "You didn't have to. Your face said it for you." So that's how I ended up in the middle of Main Street at 2 in the afternoon. Surrounded by the smell of funnel cakes and roasting corn, kids ran past with balloons. Vendors shouted over each other, and the Ferris wheel creaked faintly in the background. It was the sort of scene that's supposed to feel comforting, familiar. Today, it just felt like a stage. Nikki walked beside me, pointing out people like a tour guide. "The Hendersons firmly on your side. The Pratts neutral. Oh, and there's the Millers. They're pretending to be neutral. But don't be fooled. They're gossip funnels." Then her voice dropped. "And there," she said, "is trouble." I followed her gaze. Steph stood near the apple cider booth, arms folded, face tight. Alone. "No, Greg. No, Amy." Her expression flickered between dread and exhaustion. "Let's go," I said before Nikki could ask. Steph stiffened when she saw us approaching. Her throat bobbed in a hard swallow. "Oliver," she said quietly. "Steph." For a moment, none of us spoke. The sounds of the festival kept swelling around us, a laughing child. The pop of a balloon. Someone shouting about caramel apples. It made the silence feel sharper. "I suppose you hate me," Steph finally said. "I don't hate you," I replied honestly. "I don't understand you, but hate isn't the word." She exhaled shakily. "It was supposed to help. Amy was supposed to be our surrogate. Nothing more. We were disparity. We thought if we controlled everything, It couldn't go wrong. It went wrong, I said. She laughed bitterly. That's an understatement. Nikki glanced around, scanning for Greg out of habit. Where is he? Steph looked down at the ground like the dirt was suddenly fascinating. Home. With Amy. Planning their future. He asked me for a divorce this morning. My jaw tightened. He said the baby brought them together. She continued, voice cracking. He used the word destiny. I felt something unexpected, then sympathy. She'd been part of a terrible plan, but she hadn't expected to be replaced in the process. Greg had used her hopes against her. I'm sorry, I said. Steph looked surprised. I'm sorry, too. For everything. Before any of us could say more, shouting erupted from the direction of the main stage. Fight! We rushed toward the noise, shoving through the gathering crowd. Greg was in the center of it, surrounded by a few of his buddies. Across from them stood 3 guys from the factory, including Jake Patterson, a hothead since high school. Jake's fists were balled, his face red. Say that again, Jake growled. I said. Greg replied with a smug smirk. Your wife looks great lately. Maybe when I'm done with Amy, I'll give her a call. Jake swung. Greg ducked barely, and the whole thing exploded into chaos. Shoving, shouting, fists flying. People scrambled back, knocking over tables and spilling drinks. I should have stayed out of it. I wasn't part of this fight. I didn't need to dive into another disaster Greg had caused. But then I saw Greg pull out his phone, probably to call his father, and something in me snapped. I walked in, snatched it from his hand, and stepped back before he could grab me. Hey, Greg yelled. Give that back. No, I said simply. You're crossing a line. Knox. You're warning me, I asked. After everything you've done, the shouting around us died down. People were watching. Waiting. You want this phone? I held it up. Go get it. Then I launched it. The phone flew in a long arc over the crowd and disappeared past the food trucks. A second later, a dull crack echoed from the pavement. Greg's face turned purple. You're dead. He lunged. I sidestepped, and his momentum carried him straight into a table of pumpkins. They burst everywhere, orange guts and seeds splattering across his expensive jacket. Oops, I said. He scrambled up, dripping pumpkin, and charged again. This time, I caught his arm, twisted, and used his own weight to flip him to the ground. Stay down, I said. He didn't. Greg stumbled to his feet, breathing hard, grabbed his car keys, and ran. I chased him through the crowd, past the games and food stands. People parted instinctively. Nikki ran behind me, recording everything on her phone. We reached the parking lot just as Greg dove into his BMW. I grabbed the door, but he slammed it shut and revved the engine so hard gravel kicked up around us. Greg, I shouted. Stop. But he was already peeling out of the lot, tires screaming like he wanted to tear holes in the asphalt. Nikki jogged up beside me, holding her phone like a trophy. Got everything, she said. Even the part where he threatened you. Send it to Val, I said. It's already done. The festival slowly returned to normal. Though the energy had shifted, people whispered in tight knots, glancing between the smashed pumpkins, the skid marks, and me. Steph stood beside her car. Pal. Shaken. That was, she began. Stupid, I offered. I was going to say satisfying, she said with a faint, humorless smile. But yes, stupid too. When she left, the parking lot felt strangely quiet. I knew Greg wasn't done. People like him don't retreat, they regroup. Nikki nudged my shoulder. What now? Now, I said. Watching the road, Greg had sped down. We wait for his next move. We didn't have to wait long. Monday morning, I got the call. Mr. Knox. Patricia Winters said, I'm calling to inform you that Amy's employment has been terminated effective immediately. I sat up straighter. May I ask why? I'm not at liberty to discuss details. but certain personal choices have reflected poorly on the company. We will cooperate fully if you require documentation for divorce proceedings. Thank you, I said. Before I put the phone down, it rang again. Unknown number. Mr. Knox. A smooth voice said, "This is David Chen from Morrison Financial." The moment he introduced himself, my stomach tightened. "We are filing for a restraining order on behalf of Greg Morrison," he said. "Assault, destruction of property, harassment." I almost laughed. He threatened me. "On camera. You can contest it in court," Chen replied. "Unless you're willing to agree to certain terms." "What terms?" "You cease all contact. Public or private. You agree to an uncontested divorce with no claim to assets or alimony, and if I don't, we'll see you in court," he said. "And it won't go well for you." He hung up. I sat there for a moment, staring at the silent phone. Then I called Harlan. "They're trying to intimidate you," he said. "Standard tactic." "I'm not backing down." "You won't have to," he replied, "because I found something else. Something big." "What is it?" "Oliver," Harlan said. "I found proof Greg's been skimming money from the company. And if the IRS sees these numbers, they'll tear the Morrisons apart." Everything in me went still. "How do we make sure they see it?" Harlan cleared his throat. "We don't send it." "Then who does?" There was a long pause. "Steph," he said. He was right. She had the motive. She had the access. And she had nothing left to lose. So I made the call. And the fuse to the biggest explosion yet was lit. Steph didn't hesitate. The moment I handed her the documents, something hardened in her expression, something that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with clarity. She sent the financial records to the IRS with a short note. And by Tuesday morning, the town was buzzing louder than any festival ride. News vans circled Morrison Financial. Agents boxed up computers. And Greg was led out in handcuffs, looking like someone had just pulled the floor out from under him. It should have felt triumphant. In a way, it did. But it also felt strangely quiet inside me, like the noise of the past weeks had finally burned itself out. Amy was the next to break. Her job gone. Greg in custody. Her carefully crafted fantasy collapsing. She called me. Voice trembling. Asking for help. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I simply told her the truth. She made her choices. And she needed to live with them. I ended the call. And something heavy inside me finally loosened. Greg tried one more desperate move, breaking into my shop late one night and leaving a threat on the door. The police caught him on camera. And that was it. Violating bail conditions meant he went straight back to jail. This time without the possibility of walking out again. Amy's life unraveled even faster after that. She moved into a cheap motel, then into a subsidized apartment. The baby came. Greg stayed in prison. Her parents reluctantly took her back months later. But by then, the damage was done. She'd call sometimes. I stopped answering. Meanwhile, Steph rebuilt her life piece by piece. California suited her distance and sunlight, and people who didn't know her history. She sent me a Christmas card that simply said, "Thank you for helping me see the truth." That was all. That was enough. And me, I focused on my shop. For the first time in years, I woke up without that sinking feeling in my chest. Business grew. Reputation grew. I hired new mechanics. Eventually, I met someone, Rebecca. A teacher with a quiet laugh and no hidden agendas. She didn't treat me like a stepping stone or a safety net. Being with her felt like breathing clean air after years in a smoke-filled room. Every now and then, the past tried to tug at my sleeve. A rumor about Amy, a passing mention of Greg. But it never pierced the surface. The drama that once consumed me now felt like something that had happened to someone else in a different lifetime. One evening, about a year after the dust settled, I found an envelope taped to my shop door, Amy's handwriting. Inside was a long apology, raw, regretful, full of realizations she should have had before everything collapsed. She wanted forgiveness, or at least acknowledgement. I reread it once, then dropped it into the trash. Not out of anger, but because the story was over. She wasn't part of my life anymore. and I wasn't going to reopen wounds I had already let heal. 3 years later, I stood in a suit, my first since the wedding on stage at a small business awards gala. Knox Auto Body had doubled in size. My employees felt like family. Rebecca squeezed my hand from the front row as they handed me the Entrepreneur Award. When I looked out at the crowd, I saw a familiar face in the back, Steph, offering a quiet nod. A nod that said you survived. A nod that said we both did. Life didn't just move on. It rebuilt itself. Stronger. Steadier. Honest. Amy eventually remarried. Greg fled to Florida after prison and sank into someone else's problems. The Morrisons lost most of their influence. And I gained what I'd been missing all along, the understanding that peace isn't something you get by staying quiet. Peace is what you earn when you finally stand up for yourself. I don't think about Amy anymore. Not with bitterness. Not with longing. Just not at all. She was a chapter. Rebecca is the next one. And I'm still writing.